major role to play because we need knowledge bases. You can't, first of all, you have to show that there is really a social phenomena or a social problem, that you have to tackle it both in policy, in legislation, in practice. And without at least giving the basic figures, which is not enough, I think, but it's a beginning, you can't move forward. So this is why you need the research. So you have to start with some prevalence and incidence studies. So this is what we eventually did, but before we had our national prevalence study, quite a few years back, I already did some smaller studies working with the social workers at our welfare offices in Haifa and in some other cities. They identified whom they thought might be victims. They weren't sure, but they thought, workers working with the elderly. And then we did a lot of interviews. We did some qualitative and some quantitative interviews. And there were some amazing findings. Yes, we did find that most of these people, were victims of abuse by family members. So we started to work, especially in Haifa, because I worked very closely with the Department for the Elderly, which I helped them to establish. So we worked very closely on really how you can identify what are the characteristics, what types of treatments or services these people might. But this was on a local level, because the funds, it was still not on the agenda as a social problem. Not in Israel, and I think not really around. It came out much later. And then when, as I said, we needed the prevalence, so we did our national prevalence study, and our figures were shocking.
Exactly.
Much higher than in most other studies, and we checked it 3 times.
Okay.
It was only regarding community elders at that point. Independent people living in the community, Jewish and Arabs. And the figures were not different, because some people would say, the Arab community is still more familistic, etc., which they still are, but they are in a process of modernization. But the figures were really very similar. And our explanations why the figures were higher than in other countries at that moment, the studies that were going on, it's because the definitions were a bit different. Because we asked about events that happened within the last 3 months prior to the interview, not only the last year. I think that's one of the main reasons. And then regarding neglect, we asked neglect on primary needs, neglect in secondary needs. We delved more into the issue of neglect as well. So these are the 2 basic explanations where I think it was higher in our study. But then came studies from Hong Kong and from countries where filial piety should be high, and the figures were quite high as well. So we know now that even in Israel, I think it was still the tip of the iceberg.